She laughed and then it made it hurt. When you have a stroke, laughter and crying are right there together. Same end of the spectrum. It's just me when I cry. So I wish I could do more. I thought, well, you probably wouldn't spit it like that. Then I lost my temper on myself and I went to throw it into the sink, but I missed it. Hit the rim about 4 times. Paper flying out.
You missed your window of opportunity. Oh, you weren't going to miss that.
No, I hit the window of opportunity. I was doing too much the same thing at once. I was cooking, trying to do PayPal stuff, everything. Too much multitasking. Well, it's typical of what she had.
Grass is always greener. All right. Except for Philip, it's some other. I guess it's black and white. Is that how colorblindness works? Okay. All right. So next to the last, the penultimate session. I think I've squeezed Philip's dissertation pretty hard. I hope I haven't. I hope I haven't outstayed my welcome on this, but I think that it doesn't matter. You could probably continue to. We'd come up with new things to talk about every week because it all comes out of the Bible, and they're always fascinating things to talk about when it comes to the Bible. So again, we're in session 6, the empty tomb and the appearances. Session 1, session 2, dead certain. Session 3, reading between the lines, all these catchy titles. The touchstone, that was last week. The what do you call that? When you it's the thing that is the name of the thing. Not the namesake, but there's a fancy, probably French. Yeah, eponymous title. Well, anyway, we're post-eponymous. He is not here. Session 6. The empty tomb and the resurrection appearances in Matthew 26, Matthew 28. Of course, this is the study based on the scholarship of Dr. Gray, Dr. Philip Gray, PhD, and all the other letters. Not the alphabet, though. That's a different. So we've spent 5 sessions preparing to read this chapter. Let's read it now. So if you want to, it's quite a lengthy reading. Matthew 28, verses 1 through 20. I think we've read parts of it before. I reckon I'll read it. Matthew 28. All right, so this is the ESV version. Now, after the Sabbath, toward the dawn of the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb, and behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothing white as snow. And for fear of him, the guards trembled and became like dead men. But the angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he is risen. As he said, come see the place where he lay." Excuse me, I read that awkwardly. He is not here, for he is risen, as he said, as he confirmed he would. Come see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples that he is risen from the dead, and behold, he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him. See, I have told you. So they departed quickly from the tomb with fear and great joy and ran to tell his disciples. And behold, Jesus met them and said, "Greetings." And they came up and took hold of his feet and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee, and there they will see me." While they were going, behold, some of the guard went into the city and told the chief priests all that had taken place. And when they had assembled with the elders and taken counsel, they gave a sufficient sum of money to the soldiers and said, "Tell people, his disciples came by night and stole him away while we were asleep. And if this comes to the governor's ears, we will satisfy him and keep you out of trouble." So evil. That's collusion. That's what do they call that? Suborning, perjury? Is that the phrase? So they took the money and did as they were directed. And this story has been spread among the Jews to this day. Now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. And when they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. And Jesus came and said to them, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age."
What strikes me is using the New American Standard Bible. It's just a grammatical point. It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
Verse 6, the ESV said, "Behold," or "see the place where he lay."
Mm-hmm.
Is that what it said? Here it has grammatically correct construction, which would cause a lot of people grief when they read it. See the place where he was lying.
Mm-hmm.
Christ never lied.
I see.
I mean, I wonder if the ESV and the NASB are very close. There's just a few little different synonyms here and there. I wonder if that occurred to them that a lot of young people we normally would say in our careless ones,
Yeah.
it's not actually correct. That's where he was lying so much. My Bible says Jesus was a liar.
Mm.
He was lying in that very place.
I see. Well, at least the ESV is clear where he lay. So we've been building toward this passage for 5 weeks. The Jewish background, the vocabulary of Igairo, the teachings on hell and judgment and eternal life, the Sadducee debate, the passion predictions, the rising saints, all of that was in service of being able to read this chapter, not with the eyes of someone encountering it cold, but with the eyes of someone who understands the world Matthew was writing in and the framework he had been establishing for 27 chapters. So let's look at it carefully. Starting with the guard story. And both sides agree on the empty tomb. Let us point that out. So before getting to the discovery of the empty tomb, it's worth stepping back to notice the guard story that frames the entire resurrection account. Matthew is unique among the four Gospels in including it. So in Matthew 27, 62 through 66, there was the request for a guard. The day after the crucifixion, the chief priests and Pharisees go to Pilate with a request: post a guard at Jesus' tomb. Their stated reason: Jesus had predicted he would rise after 3 days. And they were afraid the disciples would steal his body and announce a fake resurrection. So Dr. Gray draws several significant observations from this passage. Jesus' opponents interpreted his resurrection predictions in physically literal terms. They weren't worried about a spiritual event per se. They were worried about a missing body. If the resurrection claim had been merely symbolic or metaphorical, no one would guard a tomb. That's point number one. Point number two, the logic of the guard story only makes sense if the entire controversy was about a physical body. Either the body rose bodily or it was stolen. Those were the only two options anyone in the story considered. And point three, both sides in the controversy were thinking physically. No one, not the disciples, not the authorities, seems to have considered the possibility that the resurrection might mean something non-physical. The concept of a metaphorical resurrection simply does not appear anywhere in Matthew's narrative. So that's it from all the angles. This was clearly something that at least the authorities were expecting this. Now, you could tell from the disciples' reactions, denying Christ and, running away and hiding that, they weren't. And of course, their reaction to Jesus, appearing to them, not that they didn't anticipate a resurrection to be that, but it was just, with all the events that happened, they were so scared that they didn't even dare to believe that would happen, apparently. But the authorities thought that it was going to be either a bodily resurrection or that the disciples were going to come and steal the body. So again, it's all about the physical body itself being raised, not, a story. The disciples weren't busy concocting a story about how are we going to continue this movement. They weren't doing that. They were cowering behind locked doors, Anyway, Matthew 28:11-15, which is the cover story. After the resurrection, the guards report to the chief priests. The chief priests bribe them, another word for suborning perjury, just call it what it is, bribery, to say the disciples stole the body while they were sleeping. And Matthew adds, and this story has been widely circulated among the Jews to this very day. Well, you can certainly continue. I think that that's appropriate to say to this day, the day that we are currently in, and not them only, but certainly that story has been circulating.
There's a Jewish piece called the Total Jeshu, the Generations of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
I believe they attribute it to about 500 AD. It's a compilation of Jewish traditions, and they mention Jesus. That's the title.
Mm-hmm.
That's their story there. Even 500 years later, they're talking about. That's the explanation for the empty tomb.
Mm-hmm. Of course, it's nonsensical because the authorities made sure to negate that very possibility by posting guards outside of the tomb and that heavy rock. I mean, come on. So, it might be plausible, and they would have been better off if they'd have not put guards out there and not even put a rock in front of the tomb, Then at least there would be, plausible deniability. Oh, well, the body's gone, but there was no rock, there were no guards. It was easy but no, the authorities made sure to verify the very statements, the very facts of the resurrection themselves. So wonderful. We thank them for doing that because that bolsters our faith because of the factual events concerning the resurrection. So Dr. Gray notes that this is one of the most theologically significant details in the entire chapter. The authorities' response is not the disciples are claiming a vision or they are speaking metaphorically. Their response is, how do we explain an empty tomb? The cover story is about the body because the controversy is about the body. Both the early church and its opponents agreed that the tomb was empty. They disagreed about why. But clearly, you would think that if the guards let this happen, right, wouldn't they have had a different story? I mean, wouldn't they, they were there, they saw this, but I guess the paying of the money, the bribing of it, plus I'm sure that the threat of, hey, we're going to do the same thing to you that we did to Jesus, kept that story, that lie perpetuated. Is there any evidence at all that any of those guys, is there any kind of extra biblical evidence that any of them ever recanted that story? I'm just curious. I've never thought about that. Mm-hmm. You would think, though, that perhaps shame would, even if they did change their mind, maybe they quietly, converted and.
The whole scenario put them in a bad light to start with. According to Roman law, if they was understood their custody, they should have died.
Yeah.
They should have been executed for allowing that to happen. That was a dereliction of duty. But like the authorities said, look, we'll go to the governor. We'll cover for you, basically. We'll talk to him about it. We'll make sure that won't happen. So maybe they thought they'd just leave well enough alone because if they started, yeah.
And that was a.
If the guards wouldn't have recanted, because then that would have opened the whole can of worms about their culpability in letting it happen.
See, there are pluses and minuses. If you're thinking about it, if you're the authorities, you want the guards alive, as you say, and that's a logical thing because you want them to spread that story. You want an eyewitness to say, yeah, they stole the body. And you kind of wonder, what kind of story would they have to tell? Oh, they overpowered us with our weapons, and you'd have to swallow a lot of pride, wouldn't you? Or you'd have to, there were 100 of them. There would have to be some fantastical tale. They'd have to have enough people to roll back the stone, have enough people to overpower how many guards that were there. So anyway, paying them and leaving them alive is one thing. But then also on the flip side of that, you have witnesses that, actually saw it happen. But now did they say, what was their story? What was their story to begin with? Was it, the angel, did they tell them that this happened, or did they, admit to that happening? Or did they decide maybe not to tell that because they figured they'd die either way, whether they.
Glean from this, what Matthew narrated,
Mm-hmm.
that's what they themselves told to the authorities, the chief priests.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first, they just told what they saw.
Mm-hmm.
And then the chief priest realized what the implication was, of course. So they had to come up with something else.
Yeah.
I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I don't know. I'm thinking through how you would.
Well, the thing is, I think you brought up the other day, it's just the hard-heartedness of these officials in the face of that testimony. Here come these guards running in to say, look, there was this major event, earthquake, angels, and that sort of thing. We don't know they actually saw the actual rising of the body part, but they did see.
Mm-hmm.
They did see the other phenomena that accompanied it, and then they would have known once the stone was rolled back, they peered in, know that it was empty. So, but that information comes to the scribes, to the chief priest rather. It ought to be proof positive that his claims were correct. They should have bowed down and in humility before God and asked for forgiveness. But no, they double down on it.
Mm-hmm.
That is extremely low type of character, I say.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're right. I mean, it does say that the guard went into the city and told the chief priests all that had taken place. So they did report, apparently, what they saw. But then the elders gave a sufficient sum of money to the soldiers and said that. You would think, though, having seen something like that, it must have been a powerful. I mean, it's very straightforward what it said, that they told the soldiers to say this, but you don't know what kind of threatenings also went along with that. It might have been, and if you don't say this, we'll kill you dead, and we'll do all kinds of terrible things.
Been true that back in those days, if you let something happen while you were a guard, then it went against the rules or whatever your orders were, your life was
Mm-hmm.
taken away.
Exactly. So that's the question is, they had to obviously leave them alive to tell their tale.
It says in verse 4 that they shook and then they became like dead men.
Maybe they were playing possum. That's kind of what I figure. I don't know. Do you have an opinion on that?
It sounds like this fainted. It was such an incredible thing they saw.
Yeah.
Just out of
They were as dead men. Maybe they passed out. They got overwhelmed, I guess. So
You know, either way, if it were not for, they didn't have any alternative, really. They didn't have any alternative because if they had maintained what they said, then they would have still been liable for letting it happen. I mean, even though that's ridiculous, that's incredible to say, they would have still been blamed that they didn't keep him there like they were supposed to. But with the story that they allowed the disciples to either overpower, they didn't say overpower us. They said we were just asleep when it happened. Of course, there's always the question: how do you know the disciples did it then?
mm-hmm.
It was the disciples. I guess they assumed because you feared the disciples might come steal the body, and when we woke up, the body was gone. Well, it must have been the disciples, I guess. But either way, they're in trouble if it were not for the fact they're going to go along with this ruse and be protected.
Mm-hmm.
They really didn't have much of a choice, I think. And then there was money to bribe them, so that was
Again, it is, you assume that. Why would people? Again, I'm just trying to think through this whole thing. If you go along with the story, if you're telling people, "Oh yeah, we fell asleep and they came and stole the body while we were asleep," why are you not dead? Why they leave you? Yeah, why did you? So again, it's kind of nonsensical.
Well, I might have said something. Occasionally, we do show mercy to our derelict troops. I mean, that might be on the books, but they don't always exercise.
Yeah. Again, the whole thing, it's all of that kind of fits, the making of excuses, but it's nonsensical. I mean, clearly the way they handled it, the lies and the cover up, it was messy. Clearly there was lots of stuff going on and they had to keep their lies straight. And of course they would have had to have kept that lie going. Of course you never know. I guess though it would have been commented on if something had, if those guards had disappeared eventually, like, oh, they're gone. We don't know what happened to them. I don't know. I should stop speculating. But clearly something happened to the body, and that was the point of this whole thing. So, the theologically significant detail being, how do we explain an empty tomb? The cover story is about the body because the controversy is about the body. And so both sides agree on that. With this particular detail, Dr. Gray strongly supports the historical nature of the resurrection claim. If Matthew was writing fiction, why would he include a detail that implicitly concedes the opponent's point that a missing body is the center of the controversy when a fiction writer could have arranged things more neatly? So again, if you were going to make something up like that, if you were writing fiction, you wouldn't make it that messy. You would make it probably. You would make it so that it was a little more difficult to go back and, query witnesses, right? I mean, if you were making something up, then you would probably have made up the same, I don't know. Again, a lot of this stuff is so implausible, and you would think that the people that were hearing the story would have had a hard time believing, and a lot of fabrications were made up, like, why weren't they dead, that sort of thing. Why, they had to tell everybody they were asleep. All of these things it seems like you could have if you were just making the story up, or if you were just making an allusion to some sort of a, metaphysical, spiritual resuscitation or a resurrection, a resurrection of the movement, so to speak. You wouldn't go into all these details, these messy details. All right, so let's talk about the empty tomb. The women arrive at the tomb early on the first day of the week. An earthquake occurs, an angel descends and rolls back the stone. Not, Matthew is careful to note, to let Jesus out, but so the women can see in. The guards are frozen with fear, and the angel speaks. Do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here. He has risen, just as he said. Come and see the place where he lay. He is not here. So what is the significance of the empty place? The angel's invitation, come and see the place where he lay, is, in Dr. Gray's reading, one of the most revealing details in the chapter. Think about what this assumes. If the resurrection were a vision or a spiritual event or a theological metaphor, the place where Jesus had lain would be irrelevant. You don't invite people to see an empty spot to demonstrate a spiritual reality. You invite them to see an empty place to demonstrate a bodily absence. The empty tomb is important precisely because it is the material evidence of a bodily resurrection. Jesus' body is gone because it was raised. That is the only inference the angel invites. He has risen. Egerthe, is that how you pronounce it? Egerthe? Egerthe. I just should stop. The angel's proclamation uses the word that has been Matthew's word for physical raising throughout the entire gospel. Egerthe, the aorist passive of egeiro. Dr. Gray writes, he has risen from the dead, uses the same phrasing Matthew had already used when Herod speculated that Jesus might be John the Baptist, risen from the dead. In both cases, the phrase envisions a physical corpse returning to life. So this is the culmination of the lexical pattern Dr. Gray traced through the entire gospel. The word has been used consistently with a consistent physical meaning from chapter 9 all the way to chapter 28. The proclamation at the empty tomb is not a departure from Matthew's vocabulary. It's the fulfillment of it. So again, just that consistent usage of the words. The word doesn't change its meaning. It's like when we talk about the creation week, the word day, was it yom? I mean, it always means 24 hours. It doesn't mean an epoch or millions or billions of years. It's always used consistently. So the same way this word is used, egerthe or egeiro. The women arrive at the tomb early on the first day of the week. An earthquake occurs. An angel descends and rolls back the stone. Oh, excuse me. I already said that, didn't I? Never mind. We're on to slide 3. I got distracted. All right, the first appearance, Matthew 28, 9 through 10. The women leave the tomb, trembling and joyful, to tell the disciples. And then, suddenly Jesus met them. Greetings, he said. They came to him, clasped his feet, and worshipped him. Now, this is interesting to me. I don't know how much we talk about this. I know Philip's talked about ghosts and such before, but Dr. Gray focuses on a single detail that's easy to read past. The women clasped his feet. Krateo, I think that's the way you pronounce it, a word that denotes physical grip. They physically grabbed the feet of the risen Jesus. Recall session 3, where we noted that the disciples thought they were seeing a ghost when Jesus walked on water. Matthew's audience had a clear concept of what a ghost was, a non-material entity with no physical substance. That's how he's walking on the water, because he's just a phantasm. Ghosts, in Greek popular belief, were sometimes said to have no feet, which is why they float, and we get that too. Like in Pac-Man. See the ghost in Pac-Man? Which is why they float. When Matthew specifies that the women grasped Jesus' feet, he is making a quiet but pointed claim. This is not a ghost. This is a person with real physical feet that can be gripped with human hands. Dr. Gray notes the physical detail of grasping his feet is important. They're touching a real body, not perceiving a vision. The appearance is simultaneously tactile and visual. This is not the language of hallucination or psychological experience. It is the language of physical encounter. Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers. Jesus' words in verse 10 are brief and practical. Go to Galilee, and there you will see me. The risen Jesus is not floating in mystical transcendence. He's giving geographical instructions. He has a destination. He'll be in a specific place at a specific time. This is person language, not symbol language. So let's talk about the second appearance in Matthew 28, 16 through 20. The disciples go to the mountain in Galilee as Jesus had directed, and there they see him. When they saw him, they worshiped him, but some doubted. So Dr. Gray pauses at one of the most striking details in this scene. Some doubted. Even at the appearance itself, in the presence of the risen Jesus, some of the 11 disciples doubted.
I think it's possible there were 500 brethren present at this event.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that detail comes from that. Maybe Paul had mine in 1 Corinthians 15 where he said he appeared over 500 brethren at once. So it could have been a common the 11. Yeah, yeah, it could have been. But I think there are many more than just the apostles there.
Well, we'll say some of the disciples doubted, and we'll leave off the 11.
We don't know if the apostles, they could have.
So the question is, you read that and you say, well, that's pretty crummy. Why would that be? Did Jesus not look like Jesus? Was there something that was different? Well, obviously he's upright and walking around. That in and of itself is reason to doubt, right? He could look, and undoubtedly did look, the same as he used to, but you don't expect to see a dead person walking around, especially after what they did to Jesus. The last image of Jesus you have is, bloodied and bruised and beaten, and just, you're probably, God, please, take him sooner than later because he's in anguish. You get to the point where you're just, he can't take anymore. Just, ease his pain, his agony, let him die. You could imagine that kind of thing. So seeing that, vision on the cross, and then seeing, perfectly healthy, walking around a few days later, yeah, you would think that you would doubt. Again, it's back to this, you think you see a ghost, but here's a physical person. I can understand that. I can't blame them. I can't fault them. I probably would be the same way. You'd be, incredulous. You'd be dubious. So this is a remarkable detail for Matthew to include, remarkably honest and remarkably strange, if it were a fabricated account. If Matthew were writing theological fiction, why would you include this? Why would you even put that seed of doubt in the reader's mind, right? Why introduce doubt at the climactic moment of the story? A fiction writer trying to persuade readers of a spiritual death wouldn't insert this caveat. The fact that Matthew includes it suggests he is reporting what happened, not crafting an idealized narrative. The doubt of some of the disciples is an awkward historical detail, and awkward historical details are a mark of honest reporting. So then you have the Great Commission. Jesus speaks. He speaks audibly, at length, with specific content. All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. He is heard. He communicates in specific sentences with specific commands. He gives a rationale. He promises his presence to the end of the age. This is not a vision. It's not a dissociative spiritual experience. A vision might produce a sense of presence, warmth, light, emotional, overwhelming. Specific, propositionally structured speech is the activity of a person, present, rational, physically real. I mean, you go to the road to Damascus, right? And the Lord appears to Saul, and Saul was the one that heard it. The other ones, they heard, I'm not sure exactly. What is the description of what they heard and saw?
Well, apparently they heard a sound.
Yeah.
They couldn't interpret the voice. They didn't understand what was being said.
So they
saw the vision. They saw the light.
Mm-hmm. But again, that was a vision. There is nothing like that kind of description here. Matthew doesn't say that, and some of the disciples saw and others, heard a noise or saw a light or whatever. I mean, it's spoken as if.
On that, there's a lot to be said about that particular episode.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that's a vision is what the modernists will appeal to and say, well, you see, all the appearances are of that nature. Paul only thought he saw that. He was having psychological turmoil of killing all these innocent people. That's a story like Miller, I think, might imbibe of that, and several others whose names, Buchanan, I think he was one I dealt with, gave that as an explanation. But a number of scholars have said we can't say that was a vision as in only in Paul's head,
Mm-hmm.
in as much as there were these physical phenomena that others did notice. They did not understand what the voice was, but they did see the physical phenomena. So Paul says that he appeared to me, and he said that the same way that he mentioned in the series of these others. And the thing is, all these others, there's little doubt based on this kind of evidence that they were corporeal sightings of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And so many scholars, especially the conservatives today, say the fairest way to read 1 Corinthians, or excuse me, Acts chapter 9 and the other accounts of the Damascus Road experience is that Paul actually saw Jesus. And I guess what you would infer from that would be that he made an appearance of some sort. But it was more than a mere mental phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard for us to know exactly what it was, but it was close enough to what they had seen that Paul could include himself in that same list of witnesses.
Yeah, and the other thing would be, okay, that was the initial, incident that happened to Saul. But then he went and, Ananias baptized him and, restored his sight. I mean, that was miraculous. Now, of course, you could say, oh, that's psychological. I'm sure they say that kind of thing too. But even so, that doesn't mean that the other apostles had to accept what Paul had to say. If the other apostles accepted Paul as an apostle, why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we? And if that's what happened to him, then why would we doubt that? You know what I'm saying? We're kind of making that case backwards. They clearly believed what he was telling them, so why shouldn't we believe what?
I didn't see a hand. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say what Philip was saying. I never thought of it as a vision. I always thought that he actually saw Christ himself because isn't that, I know he was an apostle out of season, but was not that one of the qualifications for being an apostle to have seen Christ? I guess he could have seen him before he was crucified. He could have actually seen him.
I remember there are other occasions in Acts where, for example, later, in a vision, Paul will see a man of Macedonia saying, "Come
Mm-hmm.
on over, help." And it seems like there's a, I looked it up. There's a reference where he says that the Lord appeared to me and said, don't be troubled. Basically,
Mm-hmm.
how many people that what in a vision? I think Luke might have used that very term.
Yeah.
But that's not the term used to describe the Damascus Road experience.
Well, I apologize if I'm not using the proper technical term. I mean, clearly he saw the Lord. The other guys,
Some people some of them have used the term sighting. That way you've got to hedge your bets. You don't have to make a decision on whether it's most of, even the radicals, would say something happened to Saul on the road to Damascus. They believe that's historical, that his experience was. They just interpret it differently from the way we normally see it. They would say it must have been, it had to have been purely psychological. Of course, they usually the naturalists believe it was. Then there are some modernists who are not quite thoroughgoing naturalists. They do believe in a spiritual realm.
Mm-hmm.
Who think that maybe God could have inspired a vision of Christ in his mind. They don't think he actually bodily saw Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
But others would say that the term, I believe it's horao is the term there, and it means to see.
Uh-huh.
And so it's the very word that's used elsewhere that for seeing. You can do an introduction to how that's used also.
Mm-hmm.
Paul saw him.
Yeah. Well, again, I didn't mean to get off on all that. My only point being that, clearly.
Well, I got you off on it. I brought that up because it was an interesting thing
Yeah.
to come across. Is that's part of the debate today.
Well, whatever, in whatever form it was, maybe there was some sort of, mystical portal that, only he saw, and it was, and then they saw the edge of the portal, and I don't know. I'm just saying, who knows? But the point being, though, that he clearly, this happened to him. He actually heard the Lord speak to him and ask him, why are you persecuting me? And then he was baptized, and then he proclaimed himself to be an apostle, and the others accepted him, right? If they accepted him, I guess that's kind of where I was getting to. Why wouldn't I accept him? If the others vouched for him, and they both vouch for each other, then why would we doubt it? And if then we take that to be true, that he is an apostle and he did have that interaction with the Lord, or we would then believe what he said about seeing the Lord. That's kind of what I was saying. So if he was lying about it, they wouldn't have accepted his story. We shouldn't have accepted his story either. The verification, I think, is sufficient from hearing the other disciples, the other apostles, accepting Paul. So if that's what he says happened, that's what happened. I guess that's kind of where I'm coming from. Of course, that doesn't, the thing that kind of eliminates what you're saying about, maybe, Paul thought he saw something. But clearly there was something there. There was a physical manifestation that the others that were with him saw. It's just that message wasn't meant for them. It was meant for Paul. So, he wasn't having an isolated, internalized vision. He was actually, seeing the visage of the Lord. He recognized him clearly. And anyway, just an interesting counterpoint to this, I thought. They clearly saw a physical body. So the disciples go to a mountain in Galilee because Jesus told the women to go, to tell them to go there. Galilee is not Jerusalem. This is not a story about a spiritual encounter in an undefined, non-physical space. The risen Jesus directed his followers to go to a specific location and then appeared there. He has moved from Jerusalem to Galilee, or at a minimum, he has directed his disciples to a place where he would be present. Physical geography matters a lot in this story. That's why it's mentioned. All right, so then the final part here, the 6 characteristics of the resurrection body, based on the full witness of Matthew 28 and the broader New Testament, which Dr. Gray draws on in the final chapter of his research, we can describe what kind of existence the risen Jesus has. Dr. Gray identifies 6 characteristics. So, here is the synthesis from the New Testament testimony. Objectivity. The body was real. not a purely subjective mental experience. It existed independently of the disciples' minds. Multiple people saw the same thing at the same time. Corporeality. Corporeality. It could be touched, heard, and seen. It occupied space. The women grasped its feet. The disciples heard it speak. Continuity. It was the same body that had been crucified. John's gospel records that the nail marks were still visible. The same person who died was raised. Identity. It was the same person with the same memories and relationships. The risen Jesus knows his disciples by name and refers to shared history. Imperishability. Unlike the resuscitated people in the gospel miracles, synagogue ruler's daughter, Lazarus, Jesus' resurrection body will never die again. He has passed through death permanently and emerged on the other side. And then sixth, spirituality. Paul calls it a spiritual body, 1 Corinthians 15:44. This does not mean immaterial. It means the body is now fully animated and governed by the Spirit, freed from the weakness, decay, and limitations of the natural body, but still genuinely corporeal. Is that fair to say? Have anything to elaborate on that one? That one's kind of interesting to
No,
me.
I like that chart. I wish I had that.
Oh, I see. The tension between corporeality, points 2 and 3, and spirituality is the most theologically difficult combination, but it is exactly what the New Testament insists on. The resurrection is not a return to ordinary physical life, resuscitation, and it's not a departure from physical existence like a ghost. It's something genuinely new, a body transformed into an immortal, glorified mode of existence while remaining real, personal, and continuous with the person who died. So I'm assuming that, when we see the Lord in reality, present, that those same characteristics will be present. Those nail marks will be there forever. Is that accurate
Remember,
to your
we had a
thinking?
discussion a few weeks ago about, and it's just a flight of speculation, really,
Mm-hmm.
about whether there were two stages to the transformation, whether there was initial transformation at the moment of resurrection
Mm-hmm.
for the earthly mode of existence, and then a post-ascension second phase, so that so flesh and blood could, because flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God. So in order for this body to get there, it couldn't have flesh and blood or flesh and bones,
Mm-hmm.
as this one did. But obviously, I think when Paul writes flesh and blood shall not inherit the kingdom of God, he means mere natural flesh and blood as we're in now.
Mm-hmm.
This physical body cannot live in that existence, but a resurrected body can. And to talk about second or third stages of transformation is just pure speculation. And I was the world's worst by I brought up the appendix to my dissertation.
Mm-hmm.
But that's all it is, speculation.
Do you think there's any reason why Jesus' resurrected body couldn't, eat meat and yet still?
Oh, no, fish.
Yeah, I'm just saying. But is there any reason why that same body had to be, transmogrified into something else that can get into heaven, or was he already in that state, and that's just the state that? I'm just curious. Is there some reason that we
It
couldn't?
makes you rethink a lot of things, and we just don't know. There's more than much more to this subject we don't know than the few things that have been revealed. But it would kind of imply something about the nature of our heavenly state with God in heaven.
Yeah.
I mean, we assume, heaven is a completely different dimension from the space-time, matter-energy continuum we live in today. Obviously, it's not a part of this universe. And yet, if a body like Jesus' body, which seemed to be geometric, I mean, there were points to the body in a way, that seemed to imply something like space or an element of space.
Mm-hmm.
If he persists there in that same kind of body, that would tell something about what we'll be like. If we have a glorified body, we'll be in this one, but it will be transformed and made better.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then, the very nature of a body, it's not just like images on a screen. It seems like we've been some sort of three dimensions, at at least or more.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know. I mean, there's
Yeah.
just so much we don't know.
I just hope that that one's in better shape and doesn't, you know, have all the aches and pains that this one
Well,
does.
you know, a legitimate question and one that has puzzled me, but I don't have an answer. I just know God can take care of it all. That would be my answer. Is we understand correctly that any child is saved that dies in infancy, well, even the unborn
Mm-hmm.
is saved and is in the arms of Jesus. But what does that human look like or will look like after the resurrection? Are we talking about little tiny, preborn infants there, or will God allow some maturation to take place to give them a certain?
Don't talk to Dante about that now. His Inferno book is kind of, whew. The optimal age. You know what? You know, it is fun to speculate, but you know, honestly, I think we'll be just happy to be there, and it'll be really whatever form it takes. We will be overjoyed at what the Lord has provided for us. You know.
You wonder if there's not like a cleanup of the bad things that happen in our physical side of life.
Yeah.
That once we die and are resurrected, like if we've been disfigured and have lost members, will they be restored?
Yeah.
And yet Jesus said something about better to enter into life halt or maimed.
Yeah.
So whoops, that sounds like you might be exactly the same person.
Yeah. That's funny. Sure. I agree. You know, but sometimes it's fun to think about things you don't have yet that, you know, you can dream about. You know, one day I might have that, whatever. It's kind of fun to speculate, kind of makes you feel better. It gives you a little bit of hope. So, you know, again, I think probably all of those songs, I know they're kind of, what do you call it, Pollyanny or whatever the word would be. But, you know, it'll be just wonderful, you know. It'll like those old Depression era songs, you know. The was that the Candy Mountain kind of songs, you know. Anyway, thinking, oh brother, where art thou? Kind of music. Anyway, you know, there'll be just it'll be wonderful. Can't even describe how wonderful it is. Streets of Gold is the best we can do to think of. Precious gems. All right, so one last observation from Dr. Gray. Unlike Luke, Matthew does not record the ascension. The Gospel of Matthew ends with the Great Commission, Jesus on a mountain, speaking, promising his presence to the end of the age, and then simply stops. There's no account of Jesus being carried up into heaven. Dr. Gray notes this without drawing too strong a conclusion from it. The absence of an ascension does not undermine the case for a physical resurrection. Matthew's account has given us all we need on that question, but it does leave open some interesting theological questions about how Matthew conceived of the ongoing relationship between the risen Jesus and the material world. What it does confirm, Matthew's story is the story of a real person, present, speaking, commanding, promising, whose story doesn't end with death. Whatever we say about the ultimate metaphysics of the resurrection body, Matthew has written the resurrection as the account of a living person present in history. So here's a closing thought to sit with. Marcus Borg, one of the scholars who argues that the resurrection was metaphorical, said that it doesn't matter whether the resurrection, quote, could have been captured on a video camera, unquote. What Matthew said is the opposite. It does matter. The empty place where Jesus lay matters. The feet the women grasped matter. I know you'd probably make a joke about matter. Anyway, the specific words Jesus spoke on that mountain in Galilee matter. These physical, historical, geographical details are not incidental decoration. They are Matthew's way of saying this happened. All right, so that'll be that. And then we'll finish up next week with session 7. Let me stop the